Hey guys, how's it going today? So, I wanted to cover something that I think is incredibly important, and I wanted to do this in what I'm thinking will be three parts. Now, I guess the best way to put it is I want to cover Akhtar's profile in sections, two sections at a time, do it in three parts. And the reason I think it's important is because I think that Akhtar's profile captures a lot of information and it is a lot to take in when you go through it, especially as someone that's say going through the wiki, trying to self-discover about their own issues and thinking that schizoid is something that might be, what's going on. There's a lot to take in here, and I think slowing down and looking at it is important. So, as far as a little background on it, this particular researcher, Salman Akhtars, I always say Akhtars for some reason, Akhtars, Um, it was a culmination of, I guess it's kind of like a meta study on how schizoid is defined and how it's diagnosed and how much of this is put together up until about 1987, I believe, is when this was published. And the original document goes by the name, if I'm dumb at the moment, so I don't have the name because I'm an irresponsible person. I just had it up and now I don't. But I'm not going to edit this out because that's part of the fun, is me being incompetent at almost every turn. Um, there we go. Okay, yes. It is schizoid personality disorder, a synthesis of developmental dynamic and descriptive features. I can't be expected to remember that whole title. Please forgive me. Anyway, Salman Akhtar, to put it simply, got everything from Bleuler, Kreshner, all the way up to Melanie Klein and Harry Guntrip. He got his understanding and whatever information is available regarding theory and idea pertaining to what all this is, what schizoid personality disorder is being defined as and being collectivized as, and try to come up with a somewhat more cohesive, more concise differentiation between other diagnoses as well as the various types of descriptors and behaviors that are often mentioned or had been mentioned historically regarding this PD. So let me I just had this one thing up and I just want to make sure I have it up like I need it. Okay, that's not what I needed. Forgive me, like I said, I'm incompetent and I don't like to shoot things twice because I think it removes the sincerity and kind of more. I don't like to edit most of my stuff for that reason. I like long form, but anyway, it's beside the point. Um, and a lot of the stuff that's broken down throughout that has a lot to do with cognitive appearance, outward appearance, a study of the internal mechanisms, everything from trying to psychoanalyze the individual in regards to their past, their parents, how they were treated, signs of neglect, response to neglect, trauma response, attachment styles, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that a lot of you schizoids have probably already dug into some degree or another because you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Now, what I want to mention here is it's something that I had said before in I think a previous video is that my position on the matter is a bit unique, I would say. Um, and my position on the matter is that a lot of this is derived from the fact that, from my belief that every schizoid person is neurodivergent in some manner or another. Every schizoid I've ever met is usually a bit, or was thought to be, or believe themselves to be, either on the schizo-spectrum side of things, which would be more closely resemble at least the internal world of what would be outwardly described as schizotypal, or somebody that is more on the autistic side of things. Uh, more or less people that in the past would have been considered Asperger's, which today are often referred to as high functioning autistics. Um, in any case, that's my position on an exclusivity that I think exists when it comes to the schizoid. And before anybody thinks that I'm just trying to be like neurotypical sort of hating, it's not that. It's that I believe that if you're dealing with somebody that's neurotypical, generally speaking, if they have similar behaviors, it's more or less going to be um, closer to what you would describe as an avoidant, right? Because the reason they stay away from people is it isn't as how do I say this um, philosophical, um, sometimes spiritual, uh, intellectualized um, versions of what it is that a schizoid generally stays away from others for. But whatever. I just need to give that background before I continue what I was going to do. So I'm going to, through that lens, discuss or ramble, if you will. I'm not discussing, there's no one here but me. I'm going to ramble on a bit about the importance of what Akhtar's profile possesses, what it actually means to me when I read it, and how I think it's more evidence of my own conclusions on this particular matter. Um, because it's funny when I was reading, because in the document itself, or in the research itself, it goes through the history of how schizoid has been defined and how it's been associated, and there have been a lot of terms such as schizophrenia adjacent, autism adjacent, or autistic thinking. These are terms that have been used by a variety of people throughout the last 100 years or so when they bring up the term schizoid. And I think looking at Akhtar's profile, it's basically showing us the amount of contradictions and the amount of sort of confusion it seems is occurring within the psychological community pertaining to how to even define this and what it is. And I think a fundamental flaw in much of this is that it's not really taking into account that sort of exclusivity that I'm bringing up regarding neurodivergence. Now, I'm not saying that schizoid personality disorder is a neurodivergence in and of itself. I wouldn't be saying that. No, I'm saying that it is exclusively neurodivergent in the sense that it's a PD that develops within neurodivergent people. And the source of it is very similar to what is described in the literature. It's just that they generally want to kind of latch it onto just parental figures or immediate local environments, right? When oftentimes it extends far beyond that. And it's actually why the kind of what's considered to be the black and white or the dual thinking of the schizoid that's often described as well in the literature exists. Now, I'll start with the beginning here. So, number one, we have self-concept. So, when he talks about overt and covert, we're talking about what is visible and what, if in fact they are willing through therapy or through their own writings or whatever methods, they tend to exhibit, or sometimes it comes out, or so on and so forth through research, through studies that have been done, as well as through just case study related information and everything else. So, overtly, a schizoid, in regards to self concept, is compliant, stoic, non competitive, self sufficient, lacking assertiveness, feeling inferior, and an outsider in life. Now, the feeling inferior part, it can vary. That might oftentimes be the case, especially earlier in life, and then that kind of if the schizoid keeps going down the routes that they do, eventually that feeling of inferiority might sort of get diluted into like the great pool of ambivalence, or they might actually become actively resentful of the outside world and believe it to be inferior, using a variety of sort of logical conclusions that they come to pertaining to how humans tend to behave, and it's not often the best ways possible, to say the least. As far as the stoic and non-competitive aspects, again, often that comes with the ambivalence, the somewhat indifference, or the external indifference that's being displayed about other people's lives, themselves, humanity as a whole, and so on and so forth. Right? These are all considered to be defense mechanisms, and I agree, because internally, as often is described in the literature, including mentioned in Akhtar's profile, there's a very strong sensitivity underneath all that. Now, that sensitivity over the years oftentimes becomes disassociated from because it's far too painful. Perhaps a lot of schizoids have a memory of having such sensitivities, but nonetheless, it's seemingly gone, at least as of a specific point in their life. They kind of sort of slowly discover, oh, wait a minute, that's that's not worth feeling. I don't want to feel that anymore. They might not consciously do this, but it is often the case. And so sometimes this overtness becomes kind of intertangled with the covert aspects, which are what is listed here. Cynical, inauthentic, depersonalized, alternately feeling empty, robot-like, and full of omnipotent, vengeful fantasies, hitting grandiosity. Yeah, so I don't really agree with the grandiosity portion, but this is based on what historically schizoids have been sort of defined as and explained as. So I don't think that Akhtar's profile is meant to be something of a definitive nature. It's just supposed to be a manner of putting down everything that has been discovered up until 1987 regarding this issue, this PD. So, as far as things like omnipotence and vengeful fantasy, yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of fantasy, right? I'm sure, especially younger schizoids have probably had fantasies of, finally escaping the world using some magical or impossible means. Maybe ridding themselves of it. Maybe um, feeling kind of manic almost about their capacity to like somehow overcome it and live without it, and then live without it and succeed without it, and thrive without the external world in some way or another, right? So they'll have these sort of thoughts. But then again, like it mentions, it might switch into this complete emptiness when oftentimes many aspects of reality's cruelty will just hit them in the face, and then just dissuade them to dream, to even fantasize, or they might feel ashamed of such fantasies because they know they're essentially, for lack of a better word, coping by creating these fantasies, right? So that kind of lucidity sometimes kicks in, if you want to call it that, which can leave the schizoid sort of a husk, or feeling as they are a husk. And the cynicism is interesting, complete with the inauthenticity, because even the most cynical of a schizoid will oftentimes feel contradictions within themselves, being pulled in different directions emotionally, even if subtly, leading them to feel as if they don't have a centered self, that their sense of principle is too malleable because of the amount of doubts they have pertaining to who and what they are, even. Right. Now, if I connect this to my own thoughts, it makes absolute sense that this is the sort of development that would happen. This sort of outward indifference, callousness, um, this tendency to just dismiss any kind of hopeful thought about their fellow man, and then also all these other internal components and these contradictions, because This is kind of my point. I agree with much of the literature pertaining to the psychological damage and the psychological struggles that are discussed even within this profile, but it is a source that I have a contention with, and I don't consider this the result of having an actively neglectful or narcissistic parent, which is something that often comes up. The refrigerator mother is something that's popular in association with the schizoid. And it's interesting because to me, if the person is neurodivergent to some degree and that their environment, regardless of how conventionally loving and understanding it may be, if it cannot provide for that child or doesn't know how to, or the parents lack the metacognitive capacity to think outside of their own understanding of what is good for them and good for their child, and so on and so forth, the amount of damage that's going to be doing is going to be similar to the amount of damage that a neurotypical person might receive if, in fact, they had an actively neglectful parent. The parent does not have to be actively neglectful in the case of the neurodivergent. That's what's interesting. In fact, their active participation in the child's upbringing, if misguided, can actually cause a significant amount of damage. More so had they been just entirely neglectful in a sad sort of way. It would have been bad nonetheless, but and it probably would definitely ended up in similar places. But the active participation of trying to like make their child happy with methods or more active or more engaged with methods that are just not, in some cases, not something that an autistic child or a schizo-spectrum child could find connection and be able to build a sense of self through because of how foreign or unintuitive those methods are, and the strength of which they're being forced upon them is going to definitely lead to a significant amount of damage to their ability to create a self concept or sense of self. So, yes, that is going to lead to a similar sort of damage that is being described in a lot of these books, in a lot of these papers. And in the case of something like interpersonal relations, which is the section I want to move on to here, and I was attempting to pause my recording, but for some ungodly reason, it just. Oh no, it can. Oh, it is paused. Sorry about that. Once. I'm trying to fix my recording as I go. Again, I like to show my incompetence. I think it makes us more human to show it, to display it. All right, here we go. There. I was trying to fix something. I think it's fixed. In any case, here we go. So the second portion here starts talking about interpersonal relations. So overtly, we see someone that is withdrawn, aloof, have few close friends, impervious to others' emotions, afraid of intimacy. Okay? So, let's talk about that first. Withdrawn. Does it make sense that they would be withdrawn, considering what I just described? Yes. Aloof. If they become disassociated from their sense of what makes sense to them, what gives them emotional connection, then why would they not be aloof in regards to everything else, right? Including that set of things that they would have developed emotional connection to, but due to their environment were unable to. And again, I don't assign malevolence in most cases to why that's occurred. I think it is just a sad set of circumstances that needs to change as far as how we approach it as a society. Have few close friends. Yes, that would be difficult to develop, right? Maybe a handful of people with special interests similar to yours, but ultimately, you're going to be interacting in most cases, unless they got lucky, just hit that 777 on the life circumstances, and they found somebody that is neurodivergent that they're capable of connecting with in a similar fashion, that's able to have the conversations, and has a similar intuitive nature early in life. Now, that's probably not going to be the case considering, the likelihood of that happening by accident. Maybe in the case having siblings or a family member. Oftentimes, I hear a lot of stories from schizoids telling me that they had an uncle or an aunt or someone in their life that they were able to connect with in some significant way. Most likely, based on their descriptions, is that that very family member is neurodivergent of a similar type as themselves. So that was a person they could mirror. That was a person they can actually connect to, that could understand them, and they can be understood back. But again, this is just circumstance. Most of the time, if a person doesn't find anything like this for a significant portion of their life, or very little of it that is actively available, I think it is often the case that they develop this personality disorder, right? Afraid of intimacy. Well, who wouldn't be if you wouldn't know what intimacy even is supposed to look like or is even supposed to function as? That would obviously make it that much more difficult to be able to know how to define it, right? And if you can't define it, what are humans afraid of most of the time? What is a common thing that a human, regardless of their predisposition, is afraid of in some ways? Maybe not in some regards, and others. I know I'm not afraid of certain things that are unknown, but a fear of the unknown is a common human experience. And if intimacy is just undefined, and whatever definitions of intimacy are available are just entirely inconsistent with your own values or understanding of what it is, what little you understand of what you want, what you've been able to piece together over the years, yes, there's going to be a fear there. There's going to be a discomfort, and there's going to be a definitive thing that you want to sort of stay away from most of the time. Now, I'm at a point in my life where that is no longer the case, but I'm almost 40, and it's taking me a significant amount of time to have to patch this together on my own, and I'm still working on it. So hopefully you guys don't have to work as long on that stuff if you decide it's something for you. Now, covertly, so the more hidden qualities of this section regarding interpersonal relations, we have exquisitely sensitive, deeply curious about others, hungry for love, envious of others' spontaneity, intensely needy of involvement with others, capable of excitement with carefully selected intimates. Right? Now, the way I hear it described, and the way I experienced it as well, is this sensitivity, right, to the pain of others, is something that sometimes a lot of schizoids are almost ashamed that they possess. Maybe they see it as a weakness. Um, Oftentimes, if they do have it, they are resigned to sort of thinking, well, it's just something that I struggle with, but I can't change anything. The world cannot be changed. People cannot be changed. They will continue in their folly, and I will just quietly hurt when I, put my gaze upon it. Or they'll actively avoid looking at those things because those things will harm them. And the futility of such an emotion, because there's very little they can actively do anything about the situation. At least that's the feeling, right? That's the thought, considering they have a history most of the time. Childhood was wise of feeling impotent against a neurotypical backdrop, family and society. Then, of course, I would say that that sensitivity would be covered up by layers and layers of ambivalence and a sort of quiet resignment to the suffering of life. Deeply curious about others, yeah. I mean, I think it's there tends to be almost no, it's definitely not the wrong term would be it's not voyeuristic, that's for sure. But there tends to be, well, maybe there tends to be this sort of interest of looking at humans from the sidelines even gazing upon situations that they would never dream or want to be involved in, right? Dramas, conflicts. Sometimes they're interested in seeing them or the information that can be kind of garnered from it. Others times they will, avert their eyes because it'll just frustrate or annoy them that these things even occur and continuously occur. So I would say there's kind of again a back and forth with even that factor. A lot of the things that are mentioned as covert in Akhtar's profile, uh, even within the profile itself, there tends to be oftentimes contradictions, and I think that's because a individual that hasn't, you know, been able to fully develop a sense of self is going to be full of contradictions because if you don't have anything grounded as to what you are, in many ways, you're often to. I think you're going to often be doubting and doubting your doubts, and then doubting your doubts, and so on and so forth. And you end up in this kind of um, endless loop of questioning and doubt. But moving on here, hungry for love. That one, even that one makes me uncomfortable to read. But that one's a little bit much. I would say, it's hungry for understanding, right? Which could, in fact, culminate into something as powerful or strongly worded as love. But I would say a hunger for finding a person or people that can actively understand and not have preconceived notions or prejudgments about that are oftentimes very idiosyncratic ways of thinking. Now, I'm not going to get into that part because that's for another section that I will do in the near future. Oh, we're almost hitting 30 minutes here. It's a little longer than I want it to be. And I'm probably getting really rambly, but you already know that's what I do here, so you can't complain too much. Envious of others. Oftentimes, that envy doesn't really have to do with, I wish I could be like them. In some cases, I've heard people say that. I wish I could enjoy what they enjoy. I wish I could have what they have. But it's less of an. It oftentimes, I think, is a lot less of wanting to have what they have or be able to connect the way they connect, but to have the ability to connect to anything at all, even in the way that would make more sense, even if they can't define what that way would be, or even if they believe that way is impossible, or they just don't have a mechanism for them to be able to. I think if there is a jealousy, it's that ability to do so, right? And it's less that they want to do it the way that other people do, because they probably have a deep aversion to that. But they, I would say, have a strong interest in the ability to create something that could let them do it based on their own terms. And I think I see a lot of this in the internal fantasies of the schizoid because they will create worlds in which those parameters could exist and do exist. And that is a manner of kind of feeding or satiating that kind of desperate need for understanding, and a way of satiating the sometimes envy of other human beings' capacity to connect. So it's a more conceptual envy than it is a actual envy of the particular actions and experiences that the people they see around them are partaking in, if that makes sense. I know it's a little weird and confusing, but I think some of you might understand what I mean. Intensely needy or involvement with other, it's the same thing. That's kind of the same thing, the same kind of reasoning as I mentioned. It's less about what is happening, more about that it's happening. The what is happening, or how, sorry, better yet, the how it's happening is probably not how you would want it to happen. But the what is happening is where that involvement, or that neediness, as it's being described, is aversive to the term or phrase many of us are. I think that's what it's kind of sussing out a lot more than it realizes. And that's kind of what I mean. A lot of what's in Akhtar's profile, without the lived experience component and without consideration for the neurodivergency that is exhibited within uh, uh, every schizoid, at least that I've ever met. And I've probably met more schizoids diagnosed than otherwise than, I guess anybody ever has at this point. So, I don't know. I guess that gives me some street cred for all this. Capable of excitement with carefully selected intimates. Uh huh. Yes, yes, because when you are around someone or in a group or whatever that is can relatively understand you, then it is far easier to be able to exhibit enjoyment in an activity or a thing that you're participating in and externally express it. Right? It's not that when you're in a group that you're incompatible with and you're looking or doing it something you enjoy, there isn't some internal enjoyment you're getting out of it, as subtle as it as often can be. Um, it's that you're likely to not express it because that expressing the wrong type or the wrong way to enjoy things can often lead to not so great conclusions. Or it feels so inconclusive as to how it will be accepted that it's better just, internalized and nothing else. I think it's referring more to that if they find intimates that they are capable to be comfortable around, they have a tendency to show far more um, external expression of something that they're enjoying without so much concern. Like, and again, all of this very much falls in line with what is oftentimes discussed and talked about within autism communities as to how it is that when you have autistic people that have the same interests working toward or participating in certain activities, they are less likely to not. They're less likely to mask their eccentricities. In the case of a lot of autistic, high functioning, whatever autistic people, it might be physical or sensory displays that are kind of a comfortable or natural way of them displaying excitement. Right? It comes through the body, and they might more likely to express it or show it without as much of a concern for belittlement or punishment or similar. So I don't know if me going through these two sections was particularly helpful, but hopefully some of you find it interesting. Hopefully you can go look at it yourself. I will be going through the other sections in the near future, and I do want to cover all 6 parts of Akhtar's profile, and then eventually I want to talk about um, a few other profiles pertaining to the schizoid and how it's being represented. But I think there's enough proof, even within the literature that currently exists, that we should be investigating um, neurodiversity in regards to what schizoid PD is. And questioning whether schizotypal should be even listed as a personality disorder at all. I guess that depends. Come at me, psychs. Let's talk about it.